The wine glass exploded against the wall, and every single person in the restaurant turned to stone, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths, their conversations dying in their throats, because standing in the middle of the most expensive Italian restaurant in Chicago was a black waitress with tired eyes and worn-out shoes facing down Stefano Moretti, the man who made grown men cry with just a look, the mafia boss everyone whispered about, but nobody dared to cross, and she was not backing down. Not even when his cold blue eyes locked onto hers like a predator sizing up prey. Not even when his jaw tightened, and the three men at his table reached inside their jackets, where everyone knew they kept their guns. Because Brianna had reached her limit tonight, and something inside her had finally snapped, so when he leaned forward with that dangerous smile that had been the last thing some people ever saw, and said in a voice smooth as silk and sharp as a blade, "Do you know who I am?" Sweetheart? She did not flinch, did not look away, did not apologize. Instead, she crossed her arms over her stained uniform and looked him dead in the eye and said the words that would change both their lives forever. "I know exactly who you are, and I dare you. Throw something else if it makes you feel powerful." And the entire restaurant gasped. Because nobody, absolutely nobody, had ever challenged Stefano Moretti like this, and lived to tell about it. And before we see what happens next, before we witness the most incredible transformation you have ever seen, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop your country in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and buckle up because what happens next is absolutely wild, and you do not want to miss a single second of this story. Now, let me take you back 30 seconds to show you exactly how we got here, because Brianna's night had already been a living nightmare long before she stood up to the most dangerous man in Chicago. She had been working the dinner shift at Bella Notte for 6 hours straight, her feet screaming in her cheap shoes that she had bought from a discount store because that is all she could afford on her salary, her lower back aching from carrying heavy trays loaded with food that cost more than her weekly paycheck. Her face hurting from forcing smiles at customers who looked through her like she was invisible, like she was just part of the furniture. Just another piece of the expensive decoration in this high-class establishment. And the tips had been awful. Absolutely awful. Insulting even. $3 on a $90 check from a couple who spent the whole meal complaining about everything. $5 on a $120 bill from a business group who made her run back and forth 20 times. One table had left her 2 quarters, like this was 1,950, and she should be grateful for anything at all. And she needed every single dollar. Every penny mattered because her rent was due in 3 days, and she was still $200 short. Her electricity bill had a bright red final notice stamp on it, threatening disconnection. Her little sister Destiny needed new school uniforms because the old ones were getting too small, and kids at school were starting to make fun of her. And Brianna was so tired, so deeply exhausted not just in her body, but in her soul, tired of being treated like she was less than human, tired of people snapping their fingers at her like she was a servant in some medieval castle, and that is exactly what he did. Stefano Moretti sitting at table 7 with 3 of his men, all of them in suits that cost more than she made in 6 months, custom-tailored Italian fabric that probably cost thousands per yard, gold watches that could pay her rent for a year, and he had been snapping his fingers at her for the last 10 minutes, like she was a dog he was trying to train, not making eye contact, not saying please or thank you, just snap, 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 bring more wine. Snap, snap, snap. Take this away. Snap, snap, snap. And she had held it together. She had bitten her tongue so hard, she tasted blood, and done her job, because she needed this paycheck desperately. But then he had snapped at her one more time, dismissing her with a wave of his hand when she brought the bottle of wine he had just demanded. A $300 bottle that he barely glanced at. And something in Brianna just broke. 8 years of working terrible jobs, 8 years of raising her little sister alone after their mother died from cancer with no insurance and mountains of medical debt, 8 years of being invisible, and disrespected, and treated like garbage, by people who thought money made them better than her. And she said loud enough for him to hear, loud enough that his men heard it too. Maybe if you asked nicely instead of acting like I'm beneath you, instead of treating me like I'm not even human, you'd get better service and people might actually respect you instead of just fearing you. And the whole table went silent, completely silent. His 3 men staring at her with their mouths hanging open in shock, because nobody talked to Stefano like that. Nobody in their right mind would dare. This was the man who controlled half of Chicago's underground, the man who had built an empire on fear and loyalty and ruthless efficiency. And he had slowly turned his head to look at her properly for the first time, really look at her, not through her like she was invisible, but at her like she was a person. And she saw something flash in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or anger. Definitely interest. Something dangerous and electric, and he had picked up his wine glass. That expensive crystal glass filled with wine that cost more than her weekly salary, and thrown it against the wall, where it exploded into 1,000 glittering pieces that rained down on the marble floor like diamonds. And everyone in the restaurant froze. Forks stopped moving. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kitchen staff peeked through the door to see what was happening. Which brings us back to this moment, this impossible moment where Brianna stood trembling but defiant, while Stefano rose from his chair. All 6 feet 3 inches of him, unfolding like a dangerous animal. And the entire restaurant held its breath. You could have heard a pin drop in that moment. He walked toward her with slow, deliberate steps, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor with each measured pace, and when he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and woodsy and expensive that probably cost more than her monthly rent, he stopped just inches from her face and said quietly, so quietly that only she could hear, "You are either very brave or very stupid, and I have not decided which yet." And Brianna lifted her chin even though her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. And she said, meeting his eyes directly because she refused to look away, refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cower, "Maybe I'm just tired of people like you, thinking you own the world, thinking you can treat people however you want, just because you have money and power. Maybe I'm tired of being invisible." And for a moment, just a moment, she saw something shift in his face, something almost like recognition, like he understood what she was saying on a level deeper than words. Then he smiled. But it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a shark circling prey, and he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I do own this world, including this restaurant, which means I own you. And you are fired? Take off that apron and get out of my establishment immediately." And that is when Brianna learned that Stefano Moretti was not just a customer, not just another rich man throwing his weight around. He was the owner. He owned Bella Notte and 4 other restaurants in Chicago. He owned the building they were standing in. And she felt her stomach drop through the floor because she had just lost the only job that was barely keeping her and her sister afloat, barely keeping them from being homeless, but she would not let him see her cry, would not give him that satisfaction, would not break down in front of him and all these people. So she untied her apron with shaking hands and threw it on his table, right on top of his expensive plate of food, and said, with as much dignity as she could gather, "You can own businesses, and you can own people's fear. But money doesn't fill an empty heart, and I feel sorry for you. I genuinely feel sorry for you because you have everything and nothing at the same time." And she walked out, with her head high, even though inside she was falling apart, even though she wanted to collapse right there on the floor, and behind her she heard absolute silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They just watched her leave like they had witnessed something impossible. And 3 days later, Brianna was sitting in her dark apartment because the electricity had been shut off exactly as threatened, staring at the eviction notice taped to her door with bright red letters that said she had 72 hours to pay or be removed by the sheriff. looking at her phone where her little sister Destiny had texted from her friend's house, asking if they were going to be okay, asking if they were going to have to move again, asking if she needed to drop out of school to get a job. And Brianna did not know the answer. Did not know what to tell this 13-year-old girl who depended on her for everything. She had applied to 15 jobs in 3 days and gotten nothing. Not even a callback. Not even a rejection email. Because in this economy, everyone was struggling and nobody was hiring, and she did something she never thought she would do. Something that made her feel sick to her stomach. Made her feel like she was betraying every principle she had. She found Stefano's number because he had left his business card on the table that night. Thick, expensive cardstock with embossed lettering that probably cost more to print than her phone bill, and she called him. Her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the phone. Expecting him to laugh. Expecting him to mock her. Expecting him to hang up, or worse, have someone come teach her a lesson about disrespect. But instead, he answered on the second ring like he had been waiting by the phone, and his voice was calm, almost gentle. When he said, "Brianna, I wondered how long it would take you to call," and she was so surprised he knew her name, had bothered to learn her name, that she almost hung up. But then desperation took over, and she said through tears that she was trying desperately to hold back. "I need help. I know I have no right to ask. I know what I said to you, but my sister and I are about to be evicted, and I am desperate." And she expected him to gloat, to make her beg, to humiliate her, the way she had humiliated him in front of his men and all those people. But instead, he said something that shocked her completely. "Come to my office tomorrow at noon. I have a proposition for you, an opportunity that I think you will find interesting." And when she arrived at his office building the next day, still wearing the same jeans she had worn for 3 days because she was rationing her laundry money, trying to make everything last as long as possible, she was escorted up to the 50th floor by a man in a suit with an earpiece, who looked at her with curiosity. And the office was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked all of Chicago, like Stefano really did own the city. Like he was some kind of king, looking down on his kingdom. And he was standing by those windows in another perfect suit, charcoal gray this time with a burgundy tie. And he turned to her, and got straight to business. No small talk, no games, and said, "Someone in my organization is stealing from me millions of dollars over the past 6 months. I have narrowed it down to 5 people in my inner circle, but I cannot figure out which one because they are all smart, all careful, all covering their tracks perfectly. I need someone they would never suspect, someone they would overlook, someone invisible." And Brianna felt anger flash through her at that word that had defined her entire life. But he held up a hand and continued, "You told me you were tired of being invisible, so I am offering you a chance to use it as a weapon. You are smart. I could see that in your eyes that night. You are observant. You noticed things about me in those 10 minutes that my own men miss. And you are desperate enough to take risks that others would not. I want you to work for me. Pretend to be my new personal assistant. Watch these 5 people closely. Find out which one is the traitor stealing from me. And I will pay you $20,000 up front right now. Today. Another $30,000. When you give me the name, with proof." And Brianna's mind was reeling. Because $50,000 would change her entire life, would save her apartment, would let her sister stay in school, would give her breathing room for the first time in years, would let her actually breathe without constantly calculating whether she could afford to eat that day. But she also knew what Stefano was. Knew the kind of man who threw wine glasses and fired people for speaking truth, knew the rumors about bodies that disappeared, and she asked, her voice steadier than she felt, "What happens to the person when you find out who it is? What will you do to them?" And he looked at her with those cold blue eyes that seemed to see right through her soul and said, "That is not your concern. That is my business. You find them. I handle them. That is the deal." And Brianna knew she should walk away. Knew she was making a deal with the devil himself, knew this could destroy her, or worse. But desperation makes people do impossible things, makes them compromise principles they thought were unshakable. So she took a deep breath and said, "Yes," and he pulled out a briefcase, opened it, and inside was more cash than she had ever seen in her life. Neat stacks of $100 bills, and he counted out $20,000 right there in front of her. And the next week, Brianna entered a world she had only seen in movies. Stefano's world of dark luxury and dangerous secrets, where men carried guns under their perfectly tailored jackets and spoke in code about things that would make normal people run screaming. Where money moved in suitcases and briefcases and loyalty was literally everything, more valuable than gold. And she met his inner circle, the 5 people who had access to everything. There was Vincent, his second in command, a man in his 50s with gray temples and tired eyes who had been with Stefano since the beginning, who looked at her with deep suspicion and asked Stefano privately why he was bringing in an outsider. There was Marco, young and cocky, maybe 30 years old, always trying to prove himself, always talking about his ideas for expansion, for making more money, for being bigger and better. There was Joseph, quiet and calculating, mid-40s, always watching everyone with dark eyes that missed nothing, always taking notes, always thinking 3 steps ahead. There was Diana, the accountant, sharp and cold as ice, wearing designer suits and looking at Brianna like she was dirt on her expensive shoes, dismissive and condescending from day one. And there was Anastasia, beautiful and sophisticated, old money and old connections, who worked as Stefano's investment advisor, who came from a wealthy family and had degrees from prestigious universities, who seemed to glide through life with effortless grace, and Brianna watched them all, playing the role of the quiet assistant, taking notes in meetings about shipments and investments in territories, serving coffee during long strategy sessions, being invisible the way she had always been invisible, except now she was doing it on purpose, weaponizing it exactly as Stefano had suggested. Gathering information, watching patterns of behavior, noticing who got nervous when certain topics came up, and slowly, carefully, she began to notice things. Vincent was loyal to a fault, would die for Stefano without question. She saw it in the way he looked at him, like a soldier looks at a general, like a son looks at a father. Marco was too ambitious, too obvious, always talking about his own plans, his own ideas. But his financial records were clean when she secretly checked them. Joseph was methodical, careful, precise, nothing out of place in his accounts or his behavior. Everything documented and explained. Diana was bitter, resentful of not being promoted higher despite her skills. She made comments about being undervalued. But her numbers always added up perfectly. Every penny accounted for. And Anastasia, beautiful Anastasia, with her designer clothes and her old family name, seemed the least likely suspect. She was already rich, already powerful, already connected. What would she need to steal for? But Brianna noticed something subtle, the way Anastasia's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked at Stefano. The way she tensed, almost imperceptibly, whenever someone mentioned the old days, the way she always seemed to leave rooms when certain conversations started about the past. And at night, when Brianna went home to her little apartment that now had electricity again thanks to Stefano's upfront payment, she made detailed notes, drew connections between people and events, tried to piece together the puzzle, and tried desperately to ignore the other thing that was happening. The confusing thing, the dangerous thing, the way Stefano had started looking at her differently, not like an employee but like something else, the way he asked her opinion in meetings now, actually listening when she spoke, instead of dismissing her, the way he had replaced her worn-out shoes with expensive ones without saying a word, just leaving them on her desk with a note that said only, "For work," the way he stood closer than necessary when reviewing documents, close enough that she could feel the heat from his body, the way her heart raced when he was near, even though she knew how dangerous that was, knew she was playing with fire. And one night after everyone else had gone home, when it was just the two of them in his office, with the lights of Chicago spread out below like stars, Stefano had poured them both expensive whiskey in crystal glasses and said, "You are not what I expected." And Brianna had said, trying to keep her voice steady, "What did you expect?" And he said, "Someone easier to control. Someone who would stay invisible. Like you said. Someone who would just follow orders and keep quiet. But you see everything. You challenge me. When you think I am wrong. You are not afraid of me. Even though you probably should be. Even though everyone else is." And Brianna had looked into those blue eyes that were not quite as cold as they used to be, that had slowly been warming over the weeks she had worked for him, and said honestly, "I am terrified every single day. I am just good at hiding it. I have been hiding fear my whole life." And something passed between them in that moment. Something electric and dangerous and real, something that felt like it could change everything. And he moved closer. Close enough that she could count his eyelashes. And for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her, wanted him to kiss her despite everything. But before anything could happen, Vincent had burst in with urgent news about a shipment being intercepted, and the moment shattered like glass. And the next week, Stefano brought Brianna to an exclusive gala at the Museum of Contemporary Art, a fundraiser for politicians and business leaders where tickets cost $10,000 each, where everyone wore designer clothes and fake smiles and made deals in hushed corners. And he had bought her a dress, dark blue silk that fit her perfectly. And when she walked out of the dressing room at the boutique, he had stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. And he said quietly, "You are beautiful, truly beautiful." And she had blushed because nobody had ever looked at her like that. Like she was precious. And at the gala, while Stefano worked the room with easy charm, shaking hands and making deals and playing the part of the legitimate businessman, Brianna continued her investigation, watching and listening, and she overheard Anastasia on her phone in a quiet corner near the bathrooms, speaking in rapid Italian. And Brianna's Italian was not great, but she had been studying secretly, and she caught enough words to make her blood run cold. Words about moving money, about timing, about being almost ready, about finally getting justice, and Brianna's heart started pounding because she thought she finally had her answer. Finally knew who the traitor was. But before she could find Stefano, before she could tell him what she heard, before she could do anything at all, the main doors burst open with a crash, and men in FBI jackets stormed in, at least 20 of them, weapons drawn, shouting for everyone to get down, to put their hands where they could see them. And Brianna hit the floor with everyone else, her heart exploding with fear, her mind racing, and one of the agents grabbed her roughly, hauled her up by her arm hard enough to bruise, and said loud enough for everyone in the ballroom to hear, "Brianna Taylor, you are under arrest for conspiracy, for racketeering, and for being a federal informant working with this organization." And the whole room gasped. Hundreds of people all gasping at once. And Brianna saw Stefano's face across the room, saw the betrayal flash across it like lightning, saw his jaw clench and his hands curl into fists, saw something die in his eyes, and she screamed, "No, that is not true. I am not FBI. I am not an informant. You have to believe me." But they were dragging her toward the exit, and Stefano was not stopping them. He was just standing there watching her with those cold eyes. The coldness back full force like the past weeks had never happened, like she had never mattered at all. And they threw her in a van and drove for 20 minutes through dark streets, while she cried and begged them to explain what was happening. And then the van stopped in an empty warehouse district, and the back doors opened, and Vincent was standing there with that tired look in his eyes. And the FBI agents pulled off their jackets, and they were not FBI at all. They were Stefano's men. All of them. And Vincent said in a weary voice, "Boss wanted to see who would panic during chaos." who would make a move when everyone was distracted, wanted to see if anyone would try to run or contact someone or access accounts. And Brianna realized with a sick feeling that the whole thing was a test, an elaborate trap, and she did not know whether to be relieved or furious. And when they brought her back to Stefano's office an hour later, he was waiting by those floor-to-ceiling windows, and the coldness was gone from his eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like regret, almost like guilt, and he said, before she could speak, "I had to be sure about you. I had to know you were not betraying me." In my world, trust is earned through tests like this. And Brianna was shaking with anger and fear and adrenaline. And she said, her voice breaking, "You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. You let me think I was going to prison. You let me think you believed I had betrayed you after everything I have done, after all the trust I have given you, after I have put my life at risk for you." And Stefano moved toward her and said, and she could hear actual pain in his voice, "In my world, trust is a luxury I cannot afford. People betray me. People lie. People I love die because I trusted the wrong person. I needed to know." And Brianna said, tears streaming down her face now, "Then maybe you are in the wrong world. Maybe you need to leave this life before it destroys whatever humanity you have left." And he stopped, staring at her like she had slapped him, and said quietly, almost whispered, "Maybe I am. Maybe you are right." And then Vincent burst in again. Not fake urgent this time. Real urgent. His face pale. And he said, "Boss, we have a problem. A serious problem. During the fake raid, someone moved $3 million out of the offshore account in the Caymans. They used the chaos as cover. Used the distraction. And we traced it. It was Anastasia, she is the one. And everything clicked into place for Brianna like puzzle pieces falling from the sky. And she said urgently, "Her last name. What is Anastasia's full last name?" And Vincent said, "Anastasia Anderton. Why does that matter?" And Brianna said, her mind racing, "Check if she has any other names, any previous names, any family connections to anyone in the organization's past." And they did. Right there, pulling up records. And they found it buried in old documents. Anastasia's real birth name was Anastasia Moetti. She had legally changed it when she was 18. Her father was Giovanni Moetti, and when Brianna saw Stefano's face go completely white, saw all the blood drain from it, she knew this was bad, knew this was worse than just theft. And he said in a voice barely above a whisper, a voice filled with old ghosts, "I killed Giovanni Moetti 15 years ago. He betrayed the family. He was stealing from everyone, from widows and orphans and people who trusted us. He was going to testify against us. Turn everyone over to the feds. I put 2 bullets in his head in an alley behind his house, and I have never regretted it until this moment." And Brianna understood then that Anastasia had been playing the longest game, spending years getting close, gaining trust, waiting for her perfect moment to destroy the man who killed her father. And it was never about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about revenge, about making Stefano suffer the way she had suffered. And within an hour they knew she was running. She had already left the city with the money. But Stefano had resources everywhere, contacts in every city, eyes and ears on every corner. And 2 days later, they found her in an abandoned warehouse on the south side, near the old steel mills. And she was not alone. She had hired mercenaries, at least a dozen men with military training, with automatic weapons and body armor, and the look of people who had seen real combat. And what followed was chaos. Absolute chaos. Stefano brought his entire crew, 20 of his best men, all of them armed, all of them ready, and Brianna should have stayed behind. Everyone told her to stay behind, but she refused. She had come this far, and she was seeing it through. She needed to see the end of this story. And when the shooting started, it was deafening, bullets tearing through metal walls like paper, ricocheting off concrete, windows exploding in showers of glass, smoke filling the air from flash grenades. And Brianna stayed low behind a concrete pillar, her ears ringing so loud she could not hear anything else, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. And she saw Stefano moving through the warehouse like he had done this 1,000 times. Calm, and precise, and lethal. And then she saw him take a bullet to the shoulder, saw him stumble, saw blood spreading across his white shirt. And something in her screamed, some primal fear she did not know she had. And she ran to him without thinking, without caring about her own safety. Pulled him behind cover with strength she did not know she possessed. Pressed her hands against his wound while he stared at her in shock. And he said through gritted teeth, "You should have stayed in the car like I told you. You could get killed here." And she said, pressing harder to stop the bleeding, "Shut up, and let me help you. Just shut up for once." And then someone grabbed her from behind, strong arms around her waist, lifting her off the ground, dragging her backward, and she screamed and fought. But whoever had her was too strong, too well trained. And the last thing she saw before something hit her head was Stefano trying to get up, trying to reach her, Vincent holding him back. And then everything went black. And when Brianna woke up, she was in a different part of the warehouse. Her head pounding, her hands zip-tied behind her back so tight they were cutting off circulation. And Anastasia was there, beautiful Anastasia, with blood splattered on her designer suit and murder in her eyes, and a gun in her hand. And she said, "He took everything from me. My father, my childhood, my family. Now I take everything from him, starting with you, starting with the person he cares about." And Brianna said, trying to keep her talking, trying to buy time, "Killing me will not bring your father back. It will not heal your pain." And Anastasia laughed, a broken sound that echoed in the empty space, and said, "No, but it will hurt him. And hurting him is enough. Watching him suffer the way I suffered is enough." And Brianna knew she was going to die. Could see it in Anastasia's eyes. Could see that this woman was past reason, past mercy, and she thought about her little sister Destiny. Thought about all the things she would never get to do, never get to see. And then she saw it, a broken piece of metal rebar on the floor near her feet, and she started working her zip ties against it. Slowly, carefully, while keeping Anastasia talking, asking about her father, about her pain, about what she remembered. And Anastasia talked, grief and rage pouring out of her like a dam breaking, 15 years of pain and planning. And Brianna felt the zip tie start to give, felt the plastic cutting into her wrists, drawing blood. But she did not stop. And finally it snapped, and when Anastasia raised her gun to end it, Brianna moved, faster than she thought possible. Adrenaline making her superhuman, knocking the weapon away. And they fought, really fought, fists and elbows and desperate survival. And Brianna was not trained, had never fought like this in her life. But she was fighting for her life, fighting for her sister, fighting for the future she had just started to believe in. And she got the gun, got her hands on it, and pointed it at Anastasia, who froze. And Brianna was shaking so hard she could barely hold it steady, and then Vincent burst in with 3 men, weapons drawn. And behind them came Stefano, bleeding and pale, but alive. His shirt soaked with blood but his eyes clear and focused. And he looked at Brianna holding the gun on Anastasia, and something passed across his face. Pride, maybe, or relief, or love. And they secured Anastasia, tied her up properly, and Stefano stood in front of her and said, "Your father was not the man you thought he was. He was stealing from families who trusted him, from widows and children, from people who had nothing. He was going to destroy everyone, to save himself." And Anastasia screamed, "Liar, "My father was a good man." And Stefano said, and there was sadness in his voice, "I have the proof. I have always kept the proof in case any of his family came for revenge. I will show you." And he pulled out his phone, showed her documents, bank records, testimony, evidence of her father's crimes, and Brianna watched Anastasia's face crumble as her entire worldview shattered, as everything she had believed for 15 years turned out to be a lie. And Stefano pulled out his gun, pressed it against Anastasia's forehead, and his hand was steady. And Brianna knew he was going to do it, knew he was going to kill her right there, and she said, "Stefano, don't." And he looked at her and said, "She tried to kill you. She tried to destroy everything. She deserves this. She deserves to die." And Brianna walked up to him, put her hand gently on his arm, and said, "She deserves prison. She deserves justice. She deserves to face what she did. But killing her makes you the same as her father. Is that what you want? Is that who you want to be?" And Stefano stood there for the longest moment of Brianna's life. The gun pressed against Anastasia's skin, his finger on the trigger, everyone holding their breath. And then, slowly, so slowly it seemed to take forever, he lowered the gun, and he said, "Vincent, call our contact at the FBI, the real FBI this time. Tell them we have their embezzler and attempted murderer." And it was over. Just like that. Years of revenge and pain and violence ending not with a gunshot, but with a choice. With mercy. With Stefano choosing to be different, and 3 months later, Stefano did something nobody expected, something that shocked everyone who knew him. He walked away. Not from Brianna. Never from Brianna. But from the life, from the organization, from the darkness that had defined him for 25 years. He handed control to Vincent, who he trusted with his life. Paid off all debts. Made peace with rivals, closed old wounds. And he started over. And he did it because of her. Because Brianna had shown him that strength was not just about power and fear. It was about choosing something better, about being brave enough to change. And he used his money, his considerable fortune, to start a foundation for foster children. Kids like Brianna had been. Kids who were invisible, who needed someone to believe in them. Who needed a chance. And he rebuilt Bellanotte from the ground up, made it completely legitimate, made it clean, hired staff, and paid them well, and treated them with respect. And he gave Brianna half ownership, made her his equal partner in every single way. And one night, 6 months after the warehouse, they were standing in the empty restaurant. After closing, just the two of them, and the lights of Chicago were spreading out beyond the windows. And Stefano got down on one knee, and he pulled out a ring. Not the biggest diamond, not the flashiest, but perfect, simple, and beautiful, and he said, "You dared me to throw something else. That first night, when I threw that wine glass. You dared me to see you, to treat you like a human being. You dared me to be different, to be better, and I am asking you now. I am begging you. Dare me to be better every single day. Dare me to spend the rest of my life making you happy. Dare me to be the man you see when you look at me. Marry me, Brianna. Please marry me." And she was crying, tears streaming down her face. Happy tears this time. And she pulled him up and kissed him and said, "Yes, yes, I dare you. I dare you to love me forever. I dare you to keep changing. I dare you to be everything you can be." And he did. And they built a life together. A real life. Not based on fear or survival or desperation, but on choice and love and courage. The courage to change, the courage to be vulnerable, the courage to believe in second chances. And Brianna never forgot where she came from. Never forgot what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated as less than. So she made sure every single person who worked for them was seen, was valued, was treated with dignity and respect. And the little girl, who had raised herself, who had struggled and fought and refused to be broken, became a woman who changed not just her own life, but the life of the most dangerous man in Chicago. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is dare someone to be better than they are. Dare them to see you. Dare them to change. And sometimes, just sometimes, they surprise you by actually doing it, by choosing love over fear, by choosing mercy over revenge, by choosing to be better. And now, if this story moved you, if you felt something watching Brianna's incredible journey from rock bottom to triumph, from invisible waitress to successful business owner, from scared and desperate to confident and loved, I need you to smash that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel, because we bring you incredible true stories like this every single week, stories that will inspire you and challenge you and restore your faith in humanity. And drop a comment telling me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it when Brianna first stood up to Stefano and dared him? Was it the fake FBI raid? Was it the warehouse showdown where she fought for her life? Or was it the proposal at the end when Stefano proved he really had changed? Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. If Brianna's courage moved you, don't just watch, join the journey. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me what moment gave you chills. And let's celebrate the power of standing up and daring someone to be better. Thank you.